to today's episode of Decisions Now. My name is Erin Pearson, and I'm the host of the podcast, along with my co-host, Rigby Chevala. Today, we are very excited to have Erica Brigance on our podcast. She is the VP of Data Science at Arcbest. Welcome, Erica.
Hello, welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. We're really excited for what we're talking about today. So we have a few topics planned. We're going to talk about the future of using technology. We're going to talk about ROI within AI and data science, and we're going to talk about demand and value realization as well. So just to kick us off and talking about the future of using technology, how are you seeing technology changing and in order to help meet customer challenges?
Yeah, so I have been with Arcbest and Arcbest Technologies, which is our technology division, for almost 19 years now. And technology has changed a lot in that time. I started as a software developer. I've worked for various parts of the business over the years, back in IT for about the past 6 years. And I think, for us, the biggest thing that has changed is connectivity. We are all connected. And it's exponentially growing the amount of devices and people that are part of our connections. And so with that, we're always evaluating technology and new, methodologies to delivering solutions to our customers. I think, we have one of our pillars is we have a pragmatic approach to innovation and technology. So it's not always about the newest buzzword or the newest technology that's being announced. We certainly keep an eye on that. But for us, it's really about what are the use cases and how can that technology drive business value or value for our customers or our capacity providers.
Well, that's amazing, Erica. 19 years, and I can relate to that. I was a software developer at the beginning too, and it's changed a lot. But you're absolutely right. I think the new technology, of course, keeps evolving. But from a business-centric standpoint, typically you want to not always take the shiniest stuff. You want to test and try and make sure, it stands to the enterprise grade needs, right? So in that sense, you mentioned customer challenges, obviously it starts with that, right? Because you don't go build a hammer without knowing which nail to hit. So, how do you make that transition from understanding what the customer challenge is and then translating that into what technology you need to invest in?
Yeah. So, it starts with listening. You have to listen to your customers' challenges. You can't assume that you know what they need or how they need to solve those challenges. So really what I'll call deep listening to, even the things that they're not explicitly saying, but what are the challenges that they're up against? And once you identify those challenges, it's really about taking the full suite of technology solutions and understanding what can solve it and where it plays, and then what's the cost and benefit of exploring that technology. So those are kind of the ways that we handle it. We've got a couple of different channels where we work directly with our customers in certain industries about what their challenges are. We're certainly constantly surveying our customers, meeting with our customers on a regular basis, and diving into those challenges that they have.
So at a past company that I worked with, I was on the customer success team. And one of the things that we did quite a bit was, it was a startup as well, so it was a relatively small team, is when there was a customer challenge, we would try to bring in a developer or the CTO into the conversations, because especially when it came to product development, it made a world of a difference when the person actually coding and developing and doing like the work behind building the product was in the conversation. You would get a very different end product than when it was just like, whether it's a salesperson, customer success, or like a client facing team trying to communicate that, because typically there's the problem that people talk about. And then there's the root cause of the problem, which typically is a few layers beneath that. So is that something that you're doing at Arcbest? Like, do you have like the data science team or any engineers or anybody like going into talking to the customers as you guys are building this out? Or how do you create that loop to make sure that you are solving for the right customer challenge?
Yeah, so the answer is yes. We have team members who are working directly with our customers. And when I say customers, sometimes it's our internal teams. We've got 250 service centers across the US, and our team is traveling and really diving into the operations and understanding where the challenges are and coming up with those solutions. So we try not to talk about IT in the business. We are part of the business. We are just as responsible for delivering business solutions and results as anyone else in the organization. So we sit hand in hand with, our functional counterparts. For every project that we have not only a data science lead, but we have a functional lead that we work hand in hand. And we don't really start a large scale initiative without both of those people being identified, because they're both equally important in the process.
And can you just take a second to define, when you say start small and then like go big later, how would you define what small is?
Yeah, so small is just understanding the lay of the land of technology. We, within our data science team, we have goals around time spent in education and R&D, whether it's, soft skill development for our team or, understanding new emerging technologies. And they are expected to spend that time kind of diving into these new technologies. So one is just understanding what are the details about this technology. What are the use cases for this technology? What challenges could the technology bring? And then once you've got that level of understanding, then you're able to bring that to a solution when the problem arises.
No, that's interesting. And since you mentioned service centers, it just kind of triggered some memories for me. I was working at a logistics software company before, and there was a turnaround time issue. Like, to Erin's point, the business problem was, hey, trucks are not getting turned around quickly, right, or quick enough. And the root cause happened to be the parts manager and the inventory management, and the way the system was developed and how they were counting stuff. The part says it's there, the system says the part's there, but it's not. And so then that truck's just sitting in the shop because the part is waiting for they're waiting for the part to come. So kind of understanding those root causes and then solving for that challenge. And once we fixed the inventory system, everything was back on track for them. So that's a pretty good, I'd say, approach to what you mentioned.
And I think what you highlighted there is just the different levels of analytics. So before we can predict or make a recommendation, we have to really understand what the current state is and what's causing the current state, and don't assume that we know what's causing the current state.
No, that's good. Yeah. So in keeping with the spirit of this podcast on decisions now, right? Of course, we help our customers make decisions more effectively and quickly and accurately. How do you see, how does this fit into, to your point, your internal customers? Are these decisions translating into ROI, for example? Like, how do you figure that out? Can you even quantify some of these ROI instances?
Yeah. Well, I mean, anytime we're going to start kind of a strategic or a large scale projects, we always want to have an ROI thesis. We want to understand what the value is, either to Arcbest, to our customers, to our partners. And we have to start with identifying the metrics that we anticipate moving. And then we have to ask, do we have the right data to impact a decision to change that metric? But we always start with that ROI thesis. And, I talked about having that functional partner there with us. That's really where that knowledge share works between our team and our functional counterparts, is understanding what are the metrics that matter to the business or to our customers that we need to move or make an impact on. So every one of our large scale initiatives, we at least have that ROI thesis. To your point, sometimes we get through projects and they don't have the ROI or the quantifiable ROI that we had thought that they would be able to move. But we've always got to be laser focused on what we're attempting to accomplish and are we delivering that value? And if we're not, it likely just means that we need to change course and work on, a different initiative, or we need to reevaluate kind of how we thought we could impact that metric.
Do you have samples of what you would use as like a common ROI metric? I think like pretty traditional ones are like cost and productivity that people bring up. Are those the similar ones for you? Do you have anything else?
Those are big ones, but some of them that are sometimes harder to tie to our customer NPS. I mean, if we're working on something related to our customers, how are we moving their perception of Arcbest, or how are we delivering the solutions to them, and what's the feedback that we're getting? So, I mean, there can be an array of metrics. It really depends on the project that you're working on. And some of those are easier to quantify to a dollar amount, and some of those are a little bit harder. But I think at least having the metric forefront to everyone working on the project, and once you've got the project done and you're implementing and you're putting those insights into action, how are they moving that metric? And are they moving the way you thought they would? Are they not? Did we have unintended or unanticipated, challenges that we need to readdress? But just keeping those metrics forefront is really how you keep everyone laser focused on delivering that value.
Nice. Yeah. That also brings to mind, like, there's typically, even these metrics, right? There are a few leading indicators. Some of them are lagging indicators. And depending on the type of problem, you want to pick the right ones, because, if something's going to go bad, you probably want the leading indicators to be the indicative ones. And if you want to do like CSAT, right, you do the entire customer value chain, and then you figure out NPS was low. That's a little bit too late, right? In that particular circumstance, but you still need that, because then it's going to predict your churn rate potentially.
Yeah. And I mean, there are things that are, we're working on a project right now to optimize our city routes, and there's certainly a quantifiable ROI there. But there are other things. I mean, there are sustainability impacts to running less miles on the street. So sometimes you've got to understand what all those metrics and impacts are, because there's certainly an ESG component to all of the projects that we're doing these days as well.
Oh yeah, I haven't thought of that, because typically, to your point, it's the dollars that people see, the hard money saved on fuel, for example, or tires, versus the environmental impact, which is equally important.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, now I know why the truck near my street just goes straight and then comes back, because they're optimizing the route.
They're optimizing the route, yeah.
So I know city route optimization, that's kind of the last mile optimization. And since you brought that up, it's a pretty complex data analytics challenge, right? It involves a lot of variables, and you need to optimize for all of them. Like, how can you kind of describe what goes into that, and how much data prep is needed before you can even optimize certain things?
Yeah, so when we're optimizing our routes, we're not only optimizing for deliveries, but we're also making pickups along the way. So we're picking customers' freight up as well. With regard to deliveries, I know all that ahead of time. I know all the details. The data quality is there. When it comes to pickups, those come in throughout the day. So I have to optimize not only for what I know at the beginning of the day, but what may come in throughout the day. How good is the data that I'm getting? If I think I'm getting one pallet, but I show up and now I have 3 pallets, do I have space on the truck for that? So it gets complex just because there's that in and out of our process through that city route optimization.
That's interesting.
So that's great. So when you are putting all of this together, how do you look at like value realization to help you prioritize and select certain use cases that you want to focus on?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing about demand is just, does everyone understand the value that we can bring, and what challenges we can solve with, whether it be just a diagnostic project where we're trying to dig in and figure out what's going on, all the way up to predictive or prescriptive. So some of the demand realization is really about building the awareness for what we can do. And that comes from socializing some of the projects that we've already done. Our team works hard to make sure that the whole company knows about some of the value and the projects that were completed, and what potential use cases from what we've done we may not realize yet. When it comes to value realization, once a project or a model is put into place, it's about really understanding how we're using that to drive, a decision that's being made. That's really where we focus is, are we delivering the right insight at the right time to take an actionable, change? And that just goes back to having those metrics and really monitoring what's going on. If we're not seeing that, are people not using the insight that we have, or is the insight wrong? Do we need to consider, other data points that we need to bring in? But, just really honing in on, are we driving the value or the metric change that we anticipated along the way?
Yeah, I think I don't know if you've heard of this term. It's called the ladder of inference. And, people appreciate once they understand the inner working of something and then realize what the value of that is. And if you make that transparent, that goes a long way in kind of getting that trust and credibility within the organization. I know you guys use Use Case Hub to kind of get that visibility across the organization, which is key. But then do you also use like a prioritization framework on top of that to figure out which one goes next, or which use case is important and which one goes next?
Yeah, so we kind of separate the work that we do into really kind of two buckets. There's our strategic work, which are things that are driving either business growth, business value, and then there's what we call, run the business, the things that we need to do to keep the organization going. For example, if I have built a model that drives, optimizing city routes, it has to run. And if something happens one day, I have to get that fixed. That's what we would consider kind of a run the business kind of work that needs to go on there. When it comes to strategic, we have things that directly align to our corporate strategic goals. And we report on those, we monitor those on a regular basis. And then we have also things that we call discretionary. So those are items that maybe are not as tied to the strategic, but they have business value. They can make an impact to a customer, to our business. And with those, it's about just understanding the ROI, the time to value that it's going to take, the risk, the challenges. And those are all things that we consider whenever we're prioritizing kind of what we're going to work on next. And you're right, Use Case Hub does help us keep all of those projects that are in we call them our project pipeline. We monitor that on a regular basis, what's coming in, what's the most important, what's going to make the most impact, and when are we going to have the resources available to work on it, because not all projects are the same either.
So one of the things that I've seen when working with different teams is naturally there's different teams that are more receptive to getting this type of information. Some of them are frankly just better at using it. It's whether it's a team or the actual, like the individuals that make up the team. Can vary, so that can obviously change over time. But how does that play a part in the prioritization or potentially in like the actual value realization that you're getting on the other end?
Yeah, I mean, most of the insights, I mean, we're a pretty large organization. We've got, 14,000 employees. So the answer is if I'm delivering an insight, there are some people that naturally may find more value in it than others. It's really about just delivering it when they can make the impact and having that feedback loop too. Like if you don't find the insight useful or it's not providing that value, how could it be made better? But we tend to not focus so much on, is the person going to trust the insight? It's about building that trust with them. And if it, over time is not as valuable, what can we do to make that insight more valuable for them?
So then, do you see that there are that the maturity how has the maturity changed throughout the 19 years that you've been within Arcbest? Because obviously, like, data is becoming a more and more common thing that everybody is practicing. So how have you seen that change?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is we're all using data in everyday life now. We might have been before, but it's certainly more prevalent now. Whether it's, we've started rolling out Power BI for a lot of our descriptive and diagnostic work, or, and where we've matured is more into the predictive and the prescriptive realm. That area is, I would say, fairly new in our organization. Arcbest is 100 years old this year. Our technology division is 60 years old this year. Our data science team is about 5 to 6 years old. So just to give you scale of kind of, it's fairly new to our technology division, although we've been doing analytics for years. That whole time, it's kind of been formalized in the past couple of years. But some areas are more receptive to that. Some are more proactive in understanding what some of that could deliver to them, or identifying use cases with us along the way. But I'd say we're a pretty mature organization whenever it comes to analytics and how we're using it to drive our business.
Are there any like certain particular challenges that you really see when you're trying to roll this out, or like advice that you would give to somebody who's just getting started with it?
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people start small and don't assume two things, that you have the data needed to predict or prescribe something, because sometimes you just do not have the data that you need. And second, really focus on, just because I can predict an outcome does not mean that I can drive business value. Because if I can't change the outcome, or I can't change a decision was made, I don't know if it is necessarily useful in a business context that I can predict that something's going to happen. So you really got to understand, are you going to be able to change the outcome here, or are you going to be able to change a decision that's being made if you're going to go that route?
Yeah, that's a very key point, right? I mean, if you just predict what's going to happen anyway, what's the point, right? How do you, make sense of that? That's great. And I know one of the other things that we typically deal with a lot of our customers is, and you mentioned this, like start small, but even there, I think they have to find the most valuable ROI even within that set, right? And get, because if you take the least ROI and the smallest use case, well, even though you succeed, the wow factor and someone to say, let's do more of this is pretty low.
Yeah.
Chances of that happening is low.
Yeah. And finding a partner to walk along with you. I mean, I'll go back to the first thing that I mentioned. Our team works hand in hand with people all across our organization, and helping them roll out and become advocates for what we're doing as well.
Yeah, that's right. And because one business unit does this, and then there's this network effect within the organization, or if it's a bunch of customers, it's the same deal.
Yep.
Word of mouth, people talk about it.
All right, so I have a final topic. That's the bonus topic. So the new thing everyone's talking about, Erica, ChatGPT, is it fad or is it fate?
I don't think it's fad. I mean, it has certainly, I guess the term would be gone viral. It is everywhere. I cannot open up the Wall Street Journal or anything without seeing a ChatGPT headline these days. And yeah, honestly, I have signed up. I've gone on to the site and played around with it just personally to see what it would do. And it's certainly impressive. Companies are going, it feels like, all in on it. I think for us, it goes back to that first question that was asked, though. We just really have to understand what's the business need. And our team right now, I have challenged them to come up with a couple of use cases to really understand the value there, so that we can think about like where it might fit in. But we're not just going to use ChatGPT because it is the new thing out there. The question is, how can it help solve a business challenge, or drive business value, or drive customer needs in their supply chain? So it still goes back to tying it to what's the value of using the technology. I think there might be some out there, but we're still evaluating.
I think you hit the nail on the head. So let's see how it evolves.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. I think for me, I think one of the things that it's done is because it's gotten such virality in the past, few weeks alone. I think it's going to do a spur of creativity. So it's going to like re-inspire people to think outside the box and to bring in new ideas. Even if they don't use ChatGPT or generative AI to do it, as a whole, I think it's going to kind of re-engage them in different topics and see how else they can push the barrier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that push the barrier to become viral at a minimum, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Erica, it was really great having you on the podcast today. Really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you for joining us.
No, thank you again for having me. It was great chat.
Great.
Thanks, Erica.
Thanks.
Access the full episode of Decisions Now on our website, and don't forget to subscribe to Decisions Now podcast today.